Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Assalamu alaikum class. I welcome you to English grade 8 video lessons. I'm your instructor Zia Hamid. I hope that you're doing well. My dear learners, for grade 8 we are on our unit number 3. The title is Don't Quit. It's a poem, and today this will be our lecture number 3 with the competency of vocabulary. Now, let's get started by reading and understanding our students' learning outcome for this lesson. My dear learners, our SLO is understand and utilize similes, metaphors, personification, imagery, scheme, alliteration. Now, in this video lesson, we will be talking about understanding and then using figures of speech like simile, metaphors, personification, and scheme, and also alliteration. We will be discussing imagery in some other video lesson. Now, this video lesson is about, and this SLO is about figures of speech. Now, let's see first that here we have a vertical linkage of our SLO with the previous grade that you have already studied. Now, in that one, you understand and utilize similes, metaphors, personification, mood, alliteration, and imagery. So you have a very good idea about figures of speech. Now let's move on with our brainstorming session. Today we have a question that how can we convey our ideas beautifully? How can you convey your ideas, or how can you write or speak things out of normal way, other than normal way, and to convey them in a very beautiful way that is very appealing to the reader and also to the listener. Now you can think about this, pause the video, think clearly, and come up with your suggestions and answers. Now moving on, my dear learners, let's talk about our topic, figures of speech. Now, figure of speech, they are basically words or phrases that makes a comparison between seemingly unlike things. So it's all about comparing things and also about so much more than that. Now let's look at an example. He collapsed onto the grass like a half-empty flour sack. Now, we know that we are talking about a human being and not an inanimate object, but we compared our pronoun, our subject, as the like of, like a half-empty flour sack. So we made a comparison. Instead of saying that he collapsed on the floor or he collapsed on the grass, we said that he collapsed onto the grass like a half-empty flour sack. This is from The Scarlet Abyss by James Hurst. So here we used figurative language and figures of speech. Now, you'll come across figures of speech or figurative language in poetry, in prose, and in everyday speaking and writing. So in every kind of writing and in every kind of speech, you can use your figurative language, and of course we use figures of speech, and there are so many figures of speech that you may know about some, and we will learn about some more. Now, let's talk about figures of speech, what they include and what they have. Now, figures of speech, as we know that figurative language is a language that is not to be taken literally and not to be taken as true. We make imaginative connections between similar or dissimilar things. And with figures of speech, we express meaning in fresh and original ways. So, instead of repeating the same things over and again, you can come up with your originality and your freshness in both your writing and in your speech. So that's why we use our figures of speech to make our writing and speech interesting and fresh, often act as a kind of shorthand. Now, instead of explaining something in a longer way, you could just use a figure of speech just as a shortcut or as a shorthand. So they come very handy, they're very easy, and they do not take a lot of space. So that's why they are very short and interesting as well. Now let's talk about our figures of speech simile. You are already familiar with it. Let's recall that a simile is a figure of speech that compares two unlike things by using the words like or as. So with similes, when we are using similes, we are comparing two unlike things by using the word like or as. Now let's look at an example. Life is strange with its twists and turns. Now this line uses a simile to compare life to something strange, emphasizing the unpredictable nature of life. We know that life is unpredictable and it has lots of twists and turns. So we compared life to a very strange thing having twists and turns. This is how we use our simile in this example. Now, let's talk about some more examples of the figures of speech simile. Here we have an example. A lone oak tree stood in the front yard like an aged but dedicated sentry. Now we use the word like to compare the lone oak tree standing in front of the yard to an aged but dedicated sentry. So this is how we used simile in this sentence. We compared two unlike things and we use the word like. Now next one is the dew on the leaves glistened as brilliantly as loose diamonds on silk. Now the dew on the leaves is being compared with loose diamonds on silk. These two are very unlikely things and they are put together, they are compared, and this is what we call simile. Next one is that child's eyes are warmer than the summer's sandy beach. Here again, we compared the child's eyes. The child's eyes are very warm, and the writer or the poet compared it with summer's sandy beach. And we know that summer sandy beach, they are also warm. So here we see a likeness and we compared these two things with our word then. So my dear learners, you can compare two different things with words like or as, and also some other words, for example then. So you compared two different things, and this is what we call simile. Now let's talk about metaphor. Metaphor is also a figure of speech that refers to different things which are similar in a way. So unlike simile, where we compare two different things, two unlike things, here with metaphor we are comparing things, we are referring to things that are similar or having a likeness. For example, success is failure turned inside out. The silver tint of the clouds of doubt. Now, in this verse, this metaphor suggests that success can arise from failure and that doubt, represented by clouds, can have a silver lining. The metaphorical use of silver tint conveys the idea that something positive can come out of challenges. Now, we compared similar things. We said that success is failure turned inside out, and the silver tint of the clouds of doubt. So here we are having a comparison and we used metaphor silver tint that conveys the idea that even out of misery or some very unlikely situation, you can come up successful and you can come out of the challenges. Now, let's look at some more examples of our figure of speech metaphor. The flood waves, the flood waters rose, and the river became a ravenous monster. Raging on for hours, it consumed everything in its sight. Now, we know that we are comparing river with a monster because there's a similarity. When it is in excessive form or excessive intensity, it is dangerous and it destroys everything. So this is an example of a metaphor. We are comparing the flood waters rising and the river becoming a ravenous monster, because both these, the flood and a monster, they have this thing common because they lead to destruction. Now, here we have another example. My heart, it was a floating bird that through the world did wander free, but he hath locked it in a cage and lost the silver key. Now, comparing heart with a floating bird and locking the heart in a cage. So, we are directly calling our heart like a floating bird. This is also a metaphor. Now, let's talk about our third figure of speech, which is a personification. Now, personification is about, it's a special kind of metaphor in which human qualities are given to something that is not human, an animal or an object or any idea. For example, the sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. Now, my dear learners, the root word in our figure of speech personification is person. We personify inanimate objects, objects that are other than anything other than human beings, and we give them human-like qualities to explain and make it relatable to the reader and the listener. This is why we use our personifications. And here we can see that we have given human-like qualities to the sun. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might, and he did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. Now we are giving human-like quality to the sun. Now let's talk about our fourth figures of speech, which is alliteration. Alliteration is when we use words that start with the same sound, one after another. For example, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Now, can you tell me what is alliteration over here? Yes, the letter P is being repeated over and again in mostly every word, and the sound P, the P sound, is being repeated. So this consonant is coming again and again. This is what we call alliteration in both our writing and in our speech. There are so many other examples and so many different tongue twisters which have that have actually consonants and they are repeating again and again. All of those are examples of alliteration. Now, my dear learners, we use alliteration and it's very interesting because we can remember uh, so many lines using alliteration because the consonant sound is coming again and again. So this is a very good benefit of using alliteration, and you can find them in poetry so much. Now, let's talk about scheme, and we are talking about poetry here, and we are talking about rhyming scheme. Now, rhyming scheme is the pattern of rhymes. We know rhymes are the words that sound the same at the end of the poetry, at the end of every verse, at the end of lines in a poem. It creates rhythm and musicality. Letters represent rhymes like A, B, B, means the first and the second line rhyme and the third and fourth lines rhyme. So this first and second line, they have, in any poem, if they have the same kind of rhyming, then we name them A. And moving on, we can use as many alphabets as we can. So in the third line, we have a different word, so we named it B. And in the fourth line, the same third versus last word is being repeated. We also called it B. So we use these alphabets to denote our rhyme scheme in any poem. Different schemes like AB add variety to the poem's sound and structure. Now, when you're reading a poem, you can easily find a rhyming scheme by first naming them with the letters, and name the same letter when you see the same kind of rhyme, and you will end up with your rhyming scheme of any poem. Now, rhyming schemes can be AB, or AABB, and there are so many other rhyme schemes in poems. Now, let's look at some more examples. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh. When care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Now, we see that if you want to find the rhyme scheme of any stanza, we will name this first A. Will is rhyming with uphill, and now we have another word, high. We will name it B. Sigh is also rhyming with high. Then we have a different word altogether. We will name it C. And bit is rhyming with quit. We will also call it C. Now, the rhyme scheme for this stanza is AABBCC. Now, it's very easy, isn't it? You can easily find any rhyme scheme of any stanza. Now, you have some more examples over here. The colors up high make something new. The clouds in the sky provide a beautiful view. So, high and sky are rhyming. New and view are rhyming. It's not always the case that you find your rhyming words or the stanzas in the stanza, you don't find it one after the other. Here, high comes first and sky comes after another verse. So this can be also the case. Now, another stanza is, upon a nice mid-spring day, let's take a look at nature's way. Breathe the scent of nice fresh air. Feel the breeze within your hair. Now, all these two are coming together and these two are rhyming together. So the rhyme scheme is AABB. It's very easy to understand. Now, my dear learners, it's time to watch this simulation video. You can watch it later, right after you end this video lesson. This will teach you more about figures of speech. For your classroom activity, we have taken a question from your book, page 26. Write 2 sentences for each of the following figures of speech using clues given in the bracket. These are your clues given in the bracket. Also, you have to solve another question. Add a word to each sentence to create an alliterative phrase. Now, angry, Amir, always. Now, you will come up with any word that's starting with A to complete this alliterative phrase. Now, my dear learners, here is your worksheet to solve. It can be distributed to you by your teacher or your instructor, and this will be very beneficial for your practice. Now, for the homework, you have to write sentences using figures of speech in your notebook and be creative and have fun. Now, you can make so many different sentences using all the figures of speech that we have learned: simile, metaphor, personification, alliteration, Now, here are your resources that are attached in the description of the video. You can find them easily and they will be very helpful for your better understanding. My dear learners, thank you for trying to thank you for listening and understanding about figures of speech and all the figures of speech that we saw with examples. I hope that you remember most of them, and now you can use these figures of speech to make your speech or your writing beautiful and more appealing. Till the next video lesson, Allah Hafiz.